The sun burned low on the red sand horizon. It was the kind of place most humans avoided, but Daxon needed fuel, parts, and silence. He had landed his old cargo hauler just outside the alien market on the edge of nowhere. As he tightened the straps on a crate of dried food, he felt a tug at his sleeve. He turned, expecting a merchant or a beggar. Instead, he saw a little girl, maybe 7 years old in human years. Her skin was pale purple, her hair dusty silver, tangled and full of sand. She looked up at him with huge, glowing blue eyes. "My mom died today," she said softly. "Can I spend the day with you, human?" Daxon blinked, confused. He looked around, half expecting a prank or a trap. But the girl was alone, barefoot, shaking, and clutching a small cloth bag to her chest. Before he could answer, voices echoed down the alley. Guards speaking in a language he didn't recognize were searching nearby. The girl's eyes went wide with fear. She stepped closer to him and whispered, "Please, don't let them take me." Daxon wasn't the kind of man who liked trouble. But something about her, maybe the way her lip trembled, stopped him from walking away. He sighed, lifted one of his crates, and motioned. "Okay," he said quietly, "but stay close." He tucked her behind the crate, covered her with a blanket, and rolled his trolley toward the ship. As they passed the guards, one of them stopped him. "What's in the crates?" The guard asked sharply. "Dry supplies, machine oil, and some junk parts." Daxon replied with a calm voice. The guard glanced at his manifest, then waved him on. Daxon didn't look back until they were inside the ship and the doors sealed tight. He leaned against the wall and sighed. The girl peeked out from under the blanket, her small hands still trembling. "You got a name?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "Nyxia." He handed her a protein bar and a small bottle of water. She ate in silence, sitting cross-legged on the metal floor. Daxon watched her carefully. She didn't cry, didn't speak, just chewed slowly, with her eyes on the door. That night, as Daxon checked his ship systems, he noticed something strange. The scanner picked up a tiny signal inside his ship. He followed it to the storage room and found Nyxia curled up behind a crate. He crouched beside her. "You have something on you," he said, holding up the scanner. Nyxia hesitated, then slowly reached into her pocket. She pulled out a small, glowing chip, no bigger than a fingernail. "I can't take it out," she whispered. "They put it in me when I was born." Daxon frowned. "Who are they?" She looked up, her eyes shining in the dim light. "They said I was cursed, that my mind would bring death. They killed my mom because she hid me." Daxon sat beside her in silence. He wasn't good with kids, and definitely not ones hunted for mysterious reasons. But he knew one thing: this wasn't just a lost child. The next morning, he took her to the market again, just to ask around, maybe find someone who knew where she came from. One merchant took one look at her and backed away. "You're traveling with that?" The old alien hissed. "That child is doom. Human. Get rid of her. She's a kid." Daxon snapped. "Not a weapon." The merchant leaned close. "Her bloodline is old, dangerous, and hunted for a reason. They say she sees things before they happen." Daxon's jaw clenched. He turned to find Nyxia watching him from the shade. Her head tilted. Before he could speak, she said quietly, "Don't go down the middle street today." He raised a brow. "Why?" "There's going to be a fight. Someone's going to get hurt." An hour later, screams echoed from the market's main street. A group of thugs had started a brawl, and 3 people were injured. Daxon didn't say anything, but that night, he moved Nyxia's bedroll closer to his cabin. He didn't know what she was, or why she had those strange powers, but one thing was clear: she wasn't safe out there. And now, she was his problem. "Get some sleep," he told her gently. "We're moving out tomorrow." "Where to?" she asked. "Somewhere no one can find you." She smiled softly. For the first time, Okay, she said. I'll stay close. Asterisk Daxon's ship, the Rustwing, hummed softly as it cut through the thin clouds above the desert moons inside. Nyxia sat in silence, her knees pulled up to her chest, staring out the viewport. Daxon kept checking the sensors, scanning for ships, trackers, or anything strange. But what made him more nervous was the girl sitting just 10 feet away from him. Not because she was dangerous, but because she was completely quiet, too quiet for a child. Most kids cried, shouted, asked questions, but Nyxia only watched, listened, and sometimes whispered things she shouldn't know. Want food? Daxon asked, sliding a ration bar toward her. She didn't look at it. But she took it and unwrapped it carefully. She ate in small bites, as if trained to make things last. Where were you before the market? He asked, trying to get her to open up. She didn't speak at first, then murmured, a temple. Buried in the ground. Daxon frowned. Temple. She nodded. My mom said we were hiding in a sacred place from people who wanted to use me. Daxon didn't like the sound of that. Use you for what? Nyxia stared at the floor. I hear voices sometimes, not from people near me, but far away, in pain. Her small hand trembled. Sometimes. I hear things before they happen. Daxon leaned back in his seat, mind racing. He thought of the brawl in the market, exactly where she told him not to go, and how her tracker chip was unlike anything he'd seen, buried deep in her body, humming with strange tech. This wasn't just a lost kid. This was something big and dangerous and probably illegal. Later that evening, he opened his repair kit and said, "Let me try something." Nyxia sat down on the metal bench and turned her head as he examined her neck. The tracker was small, almost invisible, buried near the base of her skull. With the scanner, he saw it had encryption older than any Earth tech. An alien in origin. This might hurt, he warned, but she didn't flinch. Daxon used a magnetic field to disrupt the signal without removing the chip. It beeped once, then went quiet. He looked up at her. No more signals, at least not. From that, Nyxia gave a small smile, but it faded quickly. They'll still find me, she whispered. They always do. He sighed and ruffled his hair. Who's they? The guards? No, she said. Something worse. The collectors. The name made Daxon pause. He had heard rumors an elite group of alien bounty hunters hired to retrieve special biological assets. They didn't work for governments or for justice. They worked for credits, for power, and sometimes for fun. That night, Nyxia had a nightmare. Daxon heard her cry out softly from the bunk. When he walked in, she was curled up tight, her fingers clenching the blanket, whispering, "Don't let them take me." He sat beside her and said gently, "No one's taking you, Nyxia. Not while you're with me." The next day, Daxon stopped at a neutral planet, a dusty place with an old human outpost. The port was quiet, mostly traders and scrappers. He found an old war buddy there, Rig, a half-cyborg, who owed him a favor. Rig took one look at Nyxia and raised an eyebrow. "She's not just a kid, is she?" Daxon shook his head. "I think she's something else, and I need answers." Rig took them to a private room in the back of the station. He scanned Nyxia, then paused at the symbol tattooed on the back of her neck, barely visible unless you knew to look. Rig's face went pale. "That's a royal blood mark," he whispered, from the old Sci cast. "Thought they were all wiped out. The what now?" Daxon asked, frowning. "Ancient bloodline. Nyxia's people were born with gifts, precognition, telepathy, empathy. Even the empires feared them, so they were hunted, enslaved, or killed." Nyxia sat quietly, watching them. "I didn't want to be born like this," she said, her voice soft. "I just wanted to stay with my mom." Daxon clenched his jaw. This wasn't about curiosity anymore. This was protection. She had no one, and the galaxy wanted her gone or captured. He looked. At Rig, you know a place she could be safe? Rig hesitated. There's an old contact on the fringe. Runs a safe house for survivors. I can send a signal. Daxon nodded slowly. Nyxia reached out and tugged his sleeve again, just like the first time. Her voice shook. Will you stay? With me, human. Daxon looked into her eyes, saw the fear, the strength, the loneliness. Yeah, he said. I'll stay close, outside. Ships moved in the distance, silent hunters already sniffing for their trail. But for now, in this small moment, the girl who heard voices finally had one that answered back. The sun had dipped below the dusty hills of the outpost world. Lights flickered weakly in the old station, casting long shadows across the metal floors. Daxon sat at the edge of his bunk, cleaning his blaster, while Nyxia drew silent shapes in the dust. He had received a message from Rig's contact's HFY house coordinates, buried deep in the outer fringe, but they'd have to cross two systems crawling with patrols and bounty hunters. Daxon didn't like the odds. Still, the girl's soft voice echoed in his head. Will you stay with me? Suddenly, the emergency lights blinked red. Sirens wailed outside the station. Distant but approaching fast, Daxon stood, grabbing his coat, Nyxia up. Now, she jumped to her feet without a word. Already sensing something wrong, Daxon peered through the porthole and froze. A black ship hovered above the market square, silent and sleek. Collectors. He muttered under his breath. They had found her. Boots echoed in the corridors, metallic and fast. Voices barked orders in a cold alien tongue. Daxon pulled Nyxia close. Stay behind me and do exactly what I say. She nodded. Gripping his jacket tightly, they slipped out the back of the storage bay, weaving through rusted machinery and crates. Daxon tapped into his wristpad, trying to reroute the ship's launch protocols. But the station system was locked down, standard procedure during a collector sweep. Damn, he hissed. They're sealing everything. A shadow moved across the wall, and Daxon ducked just in time. A plasma bolt sizzled past. Hitting the wall behind him, he shoved Nyxia into a side tunnel, returned fire, and sprinted after her. The corridors twisted like a maze. Some areas collapsed from age, others blocked by debris. Daxon used old maps in his head. Following the maintenance shafts that hadn't been used in years, Nyxia kept up without complaint. Breathing fast but steady, suddenly they came to a wide chamber filled with old mining equipment. In the center stood a single figure. Tall, armored, glowing red eyes behind its mask. The collector didn't move, just tilted its head. You are harboring forbidden property, it said in a mechanical voice. Release the girl. Daxon raised his weapon. She's a child, not property. The collector took a step forward. She is a breach of interstellar law. Her mind is a weapon. Before Daxon could shoot, Nyxia stepped forward. No, she whispered, and raised her small hand. The air shimmered, and the room fell deathly silent. The collector froze, its systems flickering, limbs twitching. Then, with a loud crash, it dropped to one knee, metal screeching. Daxon stared, wide-eyed. Nyxia. What did you? I asked it to stop, she whispered, and it listened. He pulled her back gently. Let's go, before more come. They ran through the ventilation ducts, crawling through tight spaces filled with dust and heat. At one point, Nyxia cried out softly, cutting her knee on a sharp metal edge. Daxon stopped, tore a strip from his shirt, and tied it around the wound. She bit her lip, but didn't cry. We're almost there, he told her. I promise. They dropped into a forgotten shuttle bay, covered in cobwebs and rot. One ship remained, an old courier model, half-functional but space-worthy. Daxon hacked the controls while Nyxia kept watch, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark as the engines roared to life. Another bolt exploded near the entrance. More collectors charged in, weapons drawn. Voices robotic and cruel returned the subject. One shouted now. Daxon grabbed Nyxia's hand and ran aboard, slamming the hatch behind them. He hit the throttle, the ship lurching upward, shaking as it punched through the atmosphere. The old vessel groaned, warning lights flaring across the console. But they broke free into open sky, and the stars opened before them like a promise. Nyxia collapsed into the seat beside him, breathing heavily. Daxon reached over and held her hand. "You okay?" She nodded slowly. "I stopped them, but it hurts to use that part of me. It burns." Daxon squeezed her hand gently. "Then don't use it unless you have to. You're not a weapon, you're a kid." She looked up at him, and for a moment, the glow in her eyes softened. "You stayed close," she said, almost smiling. He smiled back. "Told you I would." Behind them, the stars twinkled like scattered hope. Ahead of them, danger still waited. But for now, they had escaped the jaws of the hunt, and Daxon knew something else too. She wasn't just a lost girl. She was powerful, hunted and afraid, but she was also brave, and he wasn't going to let anyone take her ever again. The stars drifted by like slow-moving fireflies as Daxon guided the shuttle deeper into the outer fringe. The ship's controls shook with age, the engines rattling like old bones, but it flew, and that was enough. Nyxia sat quietly in the co-pilot's chair, her knees tucked to her chest again. She hadn't spoken since they escaped the collectors. Her eyes stared straight ahead, not at the stars, but through them like she was somewhere else entirely. Daxon glanced at her every few minutes. She wasn't just tired, she looked hollow, like some part of her had dimmed. "We're close," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. The safe house rig mentioned dips hidden in an abandoned asteroid field, full of old mining colonies. She didn't answer, just blinked. Slowly, he turned back to the controls, muttering, "Come on, old girl, hold together." They arrived at the field 2 hours later. It was a graveyard of rock and metal, forgotten by time. Broken ships floated between giant gray asteroids, and ancient stations drifted silently. Daxon brought the ship close to one of the larger outposts, its structure buried into the side of a spinning asteroid. The safe house beacon blinked faintly from the docking port. Low power, but alive. He docked the ship, opened the hatch, and stepped into stale air. The corridor was dim and silent. Only the hum of failing generators filled the space. He looked back, stayed close. Nyxia followed. Without a word, her bare feet soft on the metal floor. They moved through the winding halls, past old banners of forgotten wars and walls scorched by blaster fire. It smelled of dust, oil, and long-ago fear. Finally, a door slid open with a hiss. Inside was a wide chamber, filled with candles, mats, and half-functioning heaters, and in the middle stood an old woman, tall, cloaked in rags, her eyes glowing yellow under her hood. "I've been waiting," she said, her voice deep and cracked. "Rig sent word, but I felt her coming long before that." Daxon hesitated, his hand near his sidearm. "You're the safe housekeeper." "I am called Sira," she replied, then turned her gaze to Nyxia. "You carry the old fire in your blood, little one." Nyxia flinched and moved behind Daxon. "She doesn't trust people easily," he said. "Good," the old woman replied. "She shouldn't." Sira led them deeper inside to a room filled with glowing crystals and soft cushions. "Here," she said, "this place is shielded, hidden from scanners and eyes alike." Daxon finally let his shoulders relax. He sat down, stretching his legs. Nyxia curled up beside him, but her eyes never left the old woman. Sira sat across from them, silent for a while, then spoke gently. "She's changing, isn't she?" Nodded each time she uses her mind. "Something in her gets weaker or stronger. I can't tell." Sira's face turned serious. "She's awakening. Her powers were dormant, tied to emotion and trauma. But now that the flame has been lit, it won't go out. What does that mean? Daxon asked. It means others will come, Sarah said grimly. The collectors were just the first. The empires, the cults, even criminals. They all want a piece of her. Nyxia spoke at last, her voice small. Then I shouldn't exist. Daxon turned to her quickly. Hey, no, don't say that. But her voice cracked. My mom died because of me. You're running because of me. Everyone will get hurt. Syrah's expression softened. Child, your gift is not a curse, but a mirror. It shows others what they fear or desire most. She leaned forward. But you have a choice. Be hunted forever or learn to master it. Can I? Nyxia whispered. Syrah gave a small nod. Yes, but it will not be easy. Daxon stood and paced, his voice rough. She needs time, training, safety. Not battles, not more scars. There's no safety in the stars anymore, Sarah replied. Only choices that night. Syrah gave Nyxia a small glowing crystal and told her to hold it as she slept. It will quiet your mind. Let the pain rest. Nyxia clutched it tightly, and for the first time in days, her breathing slowed peacefully. Daxon stayed by her side, watching her sleep. Syrah approached him and placed a hand on his shoulder. You care for her more than you know. She's a kid, he said, and no one else is stepping up. Perhaps the stars chose right, the old woman said with a faint smile. Or perhaps she chose you, outside. Meteors drifted slowly across the void and within the safe house. A fragile peace held for now, but Daxon knew it wouldn't last, because sooner or later, the galaxy would come knocking again, and this time, they'd both be ready. The days passed quietly in the hidden asteroid safe house. Daxon used the time to fix his ship's old engines, while Syrah taught Nyxia how to breathe through her fear. It was the first time the girl had peace, even if just a small piece of it. But peace doesn't last long in the fringe, and Daxon knew it each morning. He checked his scanner for signs of activity each night. He sharpened his blade and ran drills with Nyxia to help her focus, not to turn her into a weapon, but to give her something she could control. Close your eyes, he told her one evening as they sat by a heating coil. Feel everything, the ship, the air, my heartbeat. She closed her eyes slowly, her little fingers brushing against the deck. I feel something coming, she whispered. Something far, but fast. That night, the message came, encrypted, flickering, and short. Urgent, Daxon. The collectors lost you. But not for long. A deal's been made. They're sending something worse. You have to choose now. It was from Rig, and that last line echoed in Daxon's chest. You have to choose now. The next morning, Syrah confirmed it. A high bounty's been placed on her, not just for capture, but for possession. Daxon's jaw tightened. What does that mean? She's no longer a fugitive, Syrah said with cold eyes. She's a prize. Daxon sat outside the sleeping quarters that night, his mind spinning. He had a choice. He could hand Nyxia over to someone trusted, maybe the Resistance. They would protect her, train her, hide her where no one could reach. She'd live. But without him, or he could take her with him and spend the rest of his life running, hiding, fighting. She'd be safe because he'd never stop protecting her, but she'd never have peace. Inside the room, Nyxia stirred from sleep and tiptoed out. She stood beside him and asked quietly, Are you going to give me away? Daxon's heart sank. He looked at her, unsure what to say. I just want what's best for you, he said gently. Somewhere quiet, safe, where you can grow up free. Her voice shook. But I won't know you. You'll be with people who can help you better than me. Nyxia stepped closer, looking up at him with wide eyes. I don't want better. I want you. And with those simple words, Daxon knew there was no choice. She had already chosen him. "I'm not giving you away," he said finally. Voice steady, "We stay together, no matter what comes next." She nodded and hugged him tightly. "I'm not scared anymore," she whispered. "I am," he replied softly. "But I'll fight scared if it means keeping you close." The next day, Sira helped them prepare. She gave Nyxia a strange crystal pendant that pulsed softly in her hand. "This will help you shield your mind," she explained, "but only if you believe in it." To Daxon, she handed an old map. "There's a place, not far from here, an old planet forgotten by the star charts. It's wild, but hidden." They packed quickly, taking only what they needed before they left. Sira placed her hand on Nyxia's forehead. "You are fire and light, child. Remember that when the darkness returns." They left the safe house just before the first scout ships appeared in the sector. As they soared back into space, Nyxia held onto the pendant tightly, her eyes calm. Daxon looked at her from the pilot's seat and smiled slightly. "You ready?" "Yes," she said, "as long as you stay close." He looked out into the vast stars. There were 1,000 reasons to turn back, but only one reason to keep flying forward, and she was sitting right beside him. Their ship drifted silently through the black. Nyxia sat in the co-pilot's seat, her eyes closed, the crystal pendant glowing gently against her chest. Daxon kept one hand on the controls, the other resting near his weapon. Every jump brought them closer to the forgotten planet Sero had mentioned. And every hour, Daxon checked the scanners, knowing the quiet wouldn't last. He had expected Nyxia to be afraid, but she wasn't. In fact, she had changed. Her voice was stronger, her steps firmer. She no longer flinched at shadows or hid behind him when someone raised their voice. "You're different," he said, as they floated in orbit around a dying moon for fuel. "I feel different," she replied softly, "like something inside me woke up, and now I can't sleep." That night, as they camped inside the ship, Nyxia sat in the center of the floor. The pendant pulsed brighter than usual, and her hair moved as if touched by wind. Daxon didn't interrupt, he just watched. Suddenly, her eyes opened, glowing blue like stars. "I saw something," she whispered. "A man with black eyes, silver armor. He's looking for me." Daxon's heart sank. "Another collector?" "No," she said. "Worse, he doesn't want to use me. He wants to erase me." Before Daxon could reply, alarms blared. A ship had entered their zone stealth mode, disabled. Weapons hot. Daxon jumped to the cockpit. Checked the signature, known. Unregistered, but massive, Nyxia. "Strap in," he called. "We've got company." The enemy ship launched a net beam, trying to lock them down. Daxon dodged, weaving through asteroid fragments, pushing the ship harder than it had ever flown. Nyxia gripped the seat, her eyes wide but calm. "Can you do something?" he asked. "I can try," she whispered. She closed her eyes, touched the pendant, and muttered words in a tongue Daxon didn't understand. The ship shook, a pulse of invisible force spread around them, the enemy's targeting. System flickered, lost aim, and their weapons shut down briefly. Daxon didn't wait. He hit the warp drive and vanished into the next jump. They landed near a green and stormy planet hours later. Lightning struck across the clouds as they descended. Trees with silver leaves bent in the wind, and animals with glowing tails ran through the shadows. "This place looks cursed." Daxon muttered. "It's quiet," Nyxia said, stepping onto the soil, but not empty. They found an old building, half-eaten by vines and covered in alien script. Inside, it was dry and warm, shielded from outside scans, just like Sira said. Daxon started repairs on the ship, while Nyxia explored the ruins. She found writings, symbols, even a mirror that shimmered with light when she stood near it. That night, Daxon cooked them a simple meal from the ration stash. Nyxia sat across from him, staring into the flames of the burner. "I think this place was once a sanctuary," she said. "For people like me." "You sure?" I feel it, she replied. Like echoes of thoughts, they whisper when I sit still. Daxon lowered his cup. You're not scared? She shook her head. Not anymore. I have you. He smiled gently. And I've got you. But peace didn't last. 3 nights later, the silver-armored figure Nyxia had seen in her vision arrived. His ship landed silently in the valley. No noise, no warning. Daxon saw it on the scanner, no ID. It's no broadcast, just dark power. He's here, Nyxia said, before the sensors even beeped. He's strong. But broken inside, they hid behind the old walls, waiting. The man walked into the ruins like he'd been there before. His black eyes scanning the stones, he spoke without looking. Child, I do not come to capture you. His voice echoed unnaturally. I come to erase what never should have been born. Daxon stepped forward, weapon drawn. You're not touching her. The man turned, calm and unafraid. You think you protect her, but you only delay what's coming. Before he could move, Nyxia stepped beside Daxon. Her eyes burned with light, and a pendant flared like fire. You can't erase me, she said, voice steady. I am not a mistake. A wave of force burst from her chest, light and sound. Rippling through the stone, the man stumbled, his armor cracking. He growled. Then vanished into smoke, leaving behind only silence. Daxon rushed to her, catching her as she staggered. Nyxia. I'm okay, she whispered. I didn't destroy him, just showed him what he truly is. He held her close, heart pounding. You're incredible. I'm yours, she whispered. As long as you stay close, he nodded. Always. Asterisk. The sun rose slowly over the strange planet, casting golden light over silver trees and glowing rivers. Nyxia stood barefoot on the soft grass, her crystal pendant no longer pulsing but calm. Quiet, at peace. Daxon watched her from the edge of the ruins, arms crossed, a smile hidden behind tired eyes. It had been 3 days since the dark man vanished. No ships had followed, no signals picked up. For the first time in weeks, no one was hunting them, but Daxon knew it was only a pause. Not the end. Nyxia turned to him, her eyes brighter than he'd ever seen. There's something I want to show you, she said. He followed her through a broken stone arch. Deeper into the ruins, they came to a chamber with walls covered in ancient carvings. She placed her hand on a symbol, a star inside a flame ant. Suddenly, the whole wall lit up. Daxon stepped back, in shock, as glowing lines traced through the stone, forming a large, circular map. Nyxia pointed. That's where others like me once lived. They called themselves the Dreaming Mind. The what? Daxon asked. They didn't fight with weapons. She said softly. They guided, healed. They helped others see what was true. Daxon looked at her carefully. And that's what you want to be. She nodded slowly. I don't want to destroy, I want to build. But I can't do it alone. He smiled and ruffled her hair gently. You're not alone. Later that evening, Daxon worked on the ship, repairing a few final systems. Nyxia sat nearby, drawing patterns in the dirt. Once the ship's ready, we'll move, he said. That map might lead us to others who can help you. Teach you, but only if you come with me, she said quickly. He paused, then gave a small nod. I already promised, didn't I? You did, she smiled. And you kept it, suddenly. A voice crackled from the ship's communicator. This is Commander Roland of the Coalition Peace Fleet. We've tracked a signal from the outlawed PSI line. Surrender the child, peacefully, and no harm will come to you. Daxon cursed under his breath. They always come, he said. Grabbing his weapon, Nyxia stood beside him. But she wasn't afraid. We don't run this time, she said. We don't, he asked, raising a brow. No, she whispered. We show them. The coalition ship descended with military precision. Soldiers in black armor disembarked, weapons drawn, eyes cold. Daxon stood at the front of the ruins, hands at his side. But ready to fight, Nyxia walked past him slowly, her bare feet silent. Her hands raised not in surrender, but in calm. She's unarmed. One soldier shouted. Another replied. That doesn't matter. Her mind is the weapon. Commander Relin stepped forward. Tall and stern. Child, you are a threat too. Balance. Your power is forbidden. No, she said gently. It's misunderstood. The air shifted. The soldiers paused, blinking in confusion. Their weapons lowered slightly, not from force, but from something else. A warmth began to spread through the trees, through the stone. Even the air hummed. Nyxia stepped forward and reached out a hand. I don't want to fight, she said, but I won't be taken. Commander Relin flinched, then shook his head as if waking from a dream. What? What did you do? I showed you the truth, Nyxia whispered, that we don't have to fear what we don't control. He hesitated, then slowly lowered his blaster. This isn't over, he said quietly, but I'll report no contact. He turned and walked back to the ship. The soldiers followed, silent and unsure. Moments later, the coalition ship lifted off, leaving them alone again. Daxon stared at Nyxia, completely stunned. You didn't hurt them, he said. She shook her head. I helped them feel. He let out a long breath and laughed softly. You are something else, kid. She grinned. I told you I was more than a curse. They sat together under the stars that night, watching small moons drift across the sky. Nyxia leaned her head against Daxon's shoulder, her voice calm. My mom protected me as long as she could, she said. She gave her life to keep me safe. Daxon didn't speak, just nodded gently. Nyxia looked up at him, her eyes shining like twin stars. I lost my mom, she whispered, but I found you. He swallowed hard, voice rough, and you're not losing me. They sat in silence, not needing words anymore. The girl with the mind like fire and the man who stayed close. And somewhere in the stars, others would hear her name, not as a weapon, not as a prize, but as the beginning of something new. Nyxia, the spark child, and Daxon, the man who chose her, together. They would walk a path no one else dared to take, and they'd walk it side by side, always close, asterisk,